JJ Hensch, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Can you tell us more about your background?
I studied developmental linguistics for years at the University of Chicago. Even though I graduated and left the university, I've always been fascinated by it. The origin of language is one of those great problems that a great deal of ink has been spilled, or electrons have been have been wired after for hundreds of years. Humans are the only species we know of that has a language, and throughout the animal kingdom, there's certain other species that have parts of it, as in certain birds can be taught to emulate sounds and can even do words and sounds, but they're very much mimics. They don't seem to actually produce unique sentences, not on a significant level. Higher primates, chimps, gorillas, bonobos have been taught various forms of language symbols or symbols of language, and they can communicate on some level. When a child gets about 2.5 language units in their utterances, all of a sudden they leap ahead. It's called fast mapping, where they pick up words at a stupendous rate. The average child acquires about 20 words a day, and no other animal ever crosses that bridge. You can get gorillas to do ASL at a certain level, and they'll identify apples or cups or people. They'll give names and things like that, but they never cross that 2.5 MLU barrier. Now, that fast mapping has never been observed in anybody but human beings. Now, every human being seems to go through that. Or every human being who develops language seems to go through that. When scientists try to roll the clock back to when did language first develop in human beings, there's no animal cognates to, if bonobos were fair at language, we'd say, okay, well, when were we at that level? But it's clear at some point human beings crossed that level and started having those language explosions. That fast mapping. When did that happen? There's some suspicion that Neanderthals had that. So it was farther down the hominid line. There's clearly some things in the hominid evolution that it's a confusing topic, because in evolution you have accretion events and you have evolutionary cranes. And to get language, you clearly have to have at least a couple of both of those. So it's thought that hominids had to learn how to mimic other sounds, which gave us our vocal tract. Neanderthals had very similar vocal apparatus. I'm not sure about Homo erectus or Homo habilis, but it's thought that occurred. It's like fire. We had fire long before we were modern humans. And so our vocal apparatus had appeared and evolved. And yet it's open to question whether Neanderthals had language. But it's almost certain that Homo habilis didn't and Homo erectus didn't have language. So when did that occur? Well, I personally believe it's a much later event. I pin it to the Toba eruption, which was 74,000 years ago.
In terms of the Toba eruption that you started talking about,
Sure.
Have we developed language at that time, or it happened way before we actually developed language?
It's absolutely so. It's impossible to get a definitive answer on that. So modern humans had appeared significantly before that, probably at least at 100,000 years ago, and quite possibly, it's hotly debated. Maybe it was 150,000 years ago. So it was tens of thousands of years before the Toba eruption that modern humans appeared. So we certainly had the vocal apparatus for language. 100,000 years ago, there were modern humans, and they had the exact same speech apparatus as you and me. So they could make the same sounds. So there is genetic evidence that there was a bottleneck shortly thereafter in which only somewhere less than 10,000 human beings survived. 10,000 human beings out of a population of 100,000 before is a 90% casualty rate. And it's something that, as modern human beings, we don't think of. Most of those people starved to death. Toba was such a huge blast. Did it kill some people by lava and dropping things on them? Probably. Okay. But the vast majority of people starved to death. It probably ended the monsoon rains for a couple of years, 2 or 3 years consecutive. It interrupted photosynthesis on a massive scale. Like I said, the 100,000 human beings was reduced to less than 10,000. And I mean, the thought is it's somewhere between 1,000 and 5,000 breeding pairs. If the monsoon is disrupted in East Africa, the big migration of antelope, we still see it to this day, that the zebras and wildebeests and antelope, they migrate in kind of a circular pattern, and they're vulnerable to hunting each of those, but they chase after the new grasslands. Well, if the monsoon rain doesn't come, there's no new grasslands, and those animals aren't moving. So you've got human populations that are going to be greatly stressed in their ability to hunt. Not to mention that the gathering is gone, and all of a sudden it's a matter of which small groups of humans are the best hunters. Okay, well, which small groups of humans are the best hunters are the most advanced linguistically. Okay,
they can collaborate with each other. They can
collaborate better. Mm-hmm. Correct. If you've got 10 hunters and you can collaborate, well, maybe you have twice the chance of bringing down a game animal. Without the animals migrating, you may not be able to scavenge, but if you can find them, then you have an advantage. And how do you find them? Well, somebody sees them and communicates that to others. Well, that's language. It's thought that language was the key right there.
So Chomsky is saying that there is one mutation in the brain that occurred, according to him, probably to one person. But let's say there is a mutation. We all agree that there's a mutation, that we are predisposed for language. A baby is definitely much better than a chimp baby in learning language, no matter how much you teach the chimp.
Sure.
So therefore, we as humans, we are predisposed. We have some sort of genetic preference to learn and use language. Now, where's the disagreement with Chomsky?
Chomsky says it's that one gene which was modified. Genetic spread like that takes hundreds of thousands of years, if not millions of years. So he says that was 1 million years ago. I disagree. It was probably, I don't know when that gene modification happened, but that's, clearly we do have a predisposition towards language, okay? But I'm not sure language was a survival advantage or a key survival advantage until something as bad as Toba happened. And what if by the time of Toba, half of the population had that language capacity and it wasn't a big survival advantage, okay? And then all of a sudden Toba happens, and now that portion of the population that has that and is lucky survives and passes on to, and it's just all of the people who don't have the language capacity die. Chomsky says that language mutation, that gene, was key. I disagree. It's just you have to have the behavioral event. You have to have the external event, and I'm hypothesizing that was Toba, which was key, and that made it critical to have language.
You mentioned during your talk about how we are the only creatures who mastered that language, right?
Right.
And all of a sudden, these language models are doing very good job at learning the only thing that makes us human, in your words as well.
So, sentence structure. I'm the kind of person who likes to test those, okay? I'll enter nonsense words in an article and I'll ask it to summarize, okay? Now, for me, what I do, because I speak Japanese, I will put in a couple of Japanese nouns or verbs in there, okay, with English conjugation, but not things that the average English speaker, and I test the result, okay, and ChatGPT understands this is a noun, or this is a verb. It has a good grasp of English sentence structure, and And when you write a paragraph and use the same word consistently, it knows, to summarize based on that. Okay. But you can get it to produce effectively a garbage summary by sticking in, I'm sure you could do the same. I mean, you speak a foreign language. I'm sure you could use nouns that, and trick it into, this is an article about something that it's not. And you could get a summary that used that noun. It wouldn't be understanding. It would be understanding the structure. And human language definitely has, you have clause structure, you have sentence structure, and you have argument structure. Okay. And ChatGPT is very good at picking up all of those, but it doesn't have the experience to say, well, I'm not really saying anything intelligent here. So it can rip out that structure and it can replicate that, and it can produce summaries of those things. Okay. But is that understanding? I maintain no, it's not. It's handy summarization.
I have a great analogy for you, and probably something to end this episode with. Could it be that with ChatGPT and all, we created the brain, but we're still missing the spirit, on the assumption that spirit is the one that fuels that brain to produce or to generate?
I like that. I like that a lot. Yeah, very much so. Yes, I like that analogy. Naja, I think you hit it right on the head.
JJ, right. It's been such a pleasure. I did not expect this much of depth and knowledge and wisdom. I can't thank you enough.
Well, it's been a pleasure for me too. Thank you very much.